cases you are working on documentary research, right? But anyhow, since this is methodology in general, not just for your TFG, you have to know the differences. So I'm going to share now, how do we select the sampling, right? What is a sample, and what are some terminologies that we should handle, right? So a sample, can you see it? Can you see there, guys? Can you see whatever? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you. Yes, we have two main categories of samples, right? The key difference between probabilistic and non-probabilistic samples boils down to how the selection process happens. Before we even go there, I just want to make sure that you get, I'm going to close it down and I'm going to show you something else so you can have an overview of whatever we're doing, and see whether we have a clear idea of what we're doing, right? I want to share this with you, just for you to see how we're progressing, right? How we're doing. Oh no, again. Okay. Hold on for just a second. I just want to show you something, and I want to be able to make it clear for you, right? I already had it here, but I closed it, unfortunately. But okay. It's just to give you an idea of what we are doing, right? Just I want to give you a whole picture of what we're having, and if you are having doubts about that, so I can help you out with that. Okay. Well, I don't know where it went. So never mind. If I find it later, I will show you. I had it here, but I don't know where I put it. So let's just continue with the sampling thing. I don't want to waste more time. Okay, you got the samples there, right? And if you look at it, you have two type of samples. So the next step for you, if you're doing a field work, is for you to choose your samples, right? What is a sample? A sample, like the name says, is just it's a short portion of whatever the population is, the population that you are studying is, right? So probabilistic sampling happens when every member of the population has a known and equal chance of being selected. This is done through random selection methods, ensuring a representative sample. This allows researchers to make statistical inferences and generalize their findings to the entire population, right? This happens when we are doing like a field work where we want to generalize, right? Most of the problems, we want to say, okay, the main reason for this problem is so and so, even though I haven't taken the whole population, like for example, the whole third media students. I have taken the third media students of 3 different schools, so I can say that my sample are those students out of all the media students, right? And the non-probabilistic sampling is a selection based on convenience or the researcher's judgment rather than random chance. Not all members of the population have an equal opportunity to be included. While this method might be faster and easier, it can lead to biased samples that don't accurately reflect the population, right? So if I want to open a place and I said, okay, I'm going to ask, I want to open this fast food place. So I'm going to ask anybody if they would like to have hamburgers or if they would like to have lomitos or hot dogs, for example, right? So if I choose anybody and I ask anybody or any age randomly, and then I have a probabilistic sample, and I will have a statistical findings, because I will say, okay, everybody loves hamburgers more than they do hot dogs. In the other hand, if I choose a certain amount of people with a certain characteristics, with certain age, for example, that will not represent my entire population, but it will reflect my target, right? Who am I targeting the fast food place to, right? That's a non-probabilistic sampling because I will not allow the whole population to be included. So somebody which is about my age, for example, won't be asked whether I like hamburgers or hot dogs. Is that understood? Yes? Is that kind of clear or not? What are the facts that I have to consider when I do probabilistic? Because we only have two types of sampling, probabilistics and non-probabilistics, right? So if we look at the characteristics, for example, selection method, when I do a probabilistic sample, I do it randomly. I don't consider any characteristics whatsoever, and I just ask anybody. So non-probabilistic will be something done convenience or under my judgment, under the researcher's judgment. Now, under the chance of selection, everyone has a chance in probabilistic sampling. But on non-probabilistic sampling, it varies depending on factors, right? And generalization. Probabilistic is possible when non-probabilistic is limited, since I cannot say that everybody like hamburgers if I only have asked teenagers, for example. So I cannot make a generalization saying that everybody likes hamburgers. It's limited to teenagers, for example. Do you see the difference? Can you tell the difference? Can you? Just show me a finger or something to let me know that you're there. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. So, when I talk about within the two main categories, we have several specific methods to use, right? So the way we choose to do our sampling will vary again. So you have probabilistic sampling, and that could be simple random sampling, right? Like the most basic method where each member has an equal chance of being selected, right? You just put everybody's name on a hat and pick them out, right? So I don't care about race or social standards or education background or whatever, right? I just put everybody in a hat. Systematic sampling happens when every nth member from a list is chosen. Think of interviewing every 10 person walking down the street. So I stand on the street and I stop, I count 10 people, right? I go 1, 2, 3, 4 till 9. And then the 10th person, whoever that is, I stop the 10th person and I ask the question. So I can say that I systematically have chosen 1 out of 10 people down the street. Stratified sampling. The population is divided into subgroups or stratas based on shared characteristics. And this is very, very important. They are based on shared characteristics. That means that they have to have things in common, right? That could be age, that could be taste, that could be race, that could be religious, that could be just about anything. It will depend on whatever I want, right? So I have those, oh my goodness, I have those stratas, right? From each subgroup, right? A random sample is then drawn from each subgroup to ensure representation. It's, for example, like taking a fruit basket sample with a certain number of apples, oranges, and bananas, right? And I do, I do that. I'm sorry, this is wrong. This is twice there. Okay. So I take a certain amount of, let's say, man, female, maybe adults, and maybe teenagers. That is a stratified sampling, right? So as to have a general idea of what they share in common. I can also ask them, I will ask them the same questions, but this population has to have some shared characteristics in order to be stratified sampling. The difference will depend on the subgroups, right? The characteristics of each subgroup that I am choosing. Then I have the cluster sampling. In this cluster sampling, the population is divided into groups or clusters, and then some of the clusters are randomly selected. Let's say I have a class of 33 or 30, and then I make groups of 5. So that would be 5 times 5 is 25. That would be 6 groups, right? Out of these 6 different groups, I will choose 2 people. Right? So I will choose clusters of, how can I say? No, I said I have five groups of 6 people, or I can have six groups of 5 people, right? And as a representation, I take, instead of taking 6 groups, I take 3 groups, and that would be my sample group, okay? But I do it in clusters. Do you get the difference? Are you getting the idea of how I do these samplings or not? Do you have any questions? It's not something that we normally discuss, right? It's not that I normally do. Entonces, I need to know that, right? I need to clarify with you. It's not something very common. Are you with me?
Yes, Professor. During my young ages, I worked with election polls. So you have to take into consideration that people from the city, they have less participation during the election if you compare to the countryside people, especially the countries. So they go, all of them, they go because they control themselves. So the participation is higher. So when you make some polls, you need to go there, you need to study statistically for instance, this is a big difference because if you do it equally, your margin, your error
Error.
should be, yeah. So it's something very interesting because you don't you don't only, if you only see numbers, you're gonna make big mistakes. You need to try to study sociologically, for instance. You need to study a lot of things. So this is for cluster sampling.
Okay, yeah, yeah. It's true. It's true. And that's very interesting. What you're saying is very interesting, right? It's true. In the countryside, people control each other. It's like gossiping, but actually it's a good gossiping, right? You didn't go, I go. I didn't see you there, you know. Yes, you're right. And we're gonna talk about, yes, somebody else. We'll talk about some specific words that we need to take into account. Okay, when we do non-probabilistic sampling, that means when we are trying to target the group, right? We do convenience sampling, which is the easiest method, selecting whoever is available and accessible. This might be surveying classmates for a school project, for example. What would you like to do for a school project? So I ask my classmates and they give me their opinions. So I am I'm choosing everybody there to know what they would like to do. The quota sampling is similar to the stratified sampling, but the difference is that the researchers set quotas for subgroups based on their proportion in the population. Imagine recruiting participants until you have a specific number of men and women, right? So if you want equal numbers of men and women, you will have a quota. You will have, for example, okay, I will have 5 men and 5 women's in this group. So that I will have the same amount of people, the same amount of males and females, and therefore a quota, right? The purposive sampling, which is also called a judgmental sampling, the researcher selects members based on their judgment of who will provide the most relevant information. This might involve interviewing experts in a particular field or elders who have more experience in certain communities, for example, right? I am doing a purposive sampling, right? I am choosing the people who will provide more information to me, right? And and make sure that information is suitable and relevant. The snowball sampling, I start with few initial subjects, then you can ask them to refer to you some other ones, right? You recruit additional subjects from the referrals of those you already interviewed. So let's say I take 10 people, I ask 10 of you to give me your opinion, but then I ask you to give me 10 other names of different people in order to interview. And so that would be the snowball sampling. Why is it a snowball? Because I start with 10, and out of 10, I already got 100, because each of you will give me 10 more. Is that clear? Yes? So imagine asking people you know for recommendations on others to interview for your study about rare diseases, for example. And I asked 10 of you to give me some ideas of the rare diseases. And then you gave me the names of 10 people who know about rare diseases or have gone through the experience of that. It's like, okay, I have a friend who has this so-and-so, which it was rare, very rare, or that may have an idea of that, right? In order to provide me with some information. Then finally, the best type of sampling for your research will depend on your specific needs and resources. Consider factors like the size and accessibility of your population, the level of generalizability you need, and the time and resources available. So you cannot do a sample which is too large if you do not have the time or the resources to access those subjects in order to ask the questions. Or let's say you want to know something about some people who, I don't know, are not available because they study all the time, or because they work so much, or because they live very far away, or because they are in flooded areas which you cannot access, then you will have to think about that too, right? Mainly you have to consider those, it's like considering the piece that you're going to eat before you chew it, because if it is too big, you will choke. So we need to consider those things, right? Size, accessibility, the level of generalization that I want or that I need in order to prove my point, and the time and resources available, or in order to answer the questions, right? Are there any questions referring to this? Because I have another, I'm going to stop sharing this one. I have another PowerPoint presentation, which is a little bit more, I don't know, friendly, let's say, with this. Are there any questions about this? Are there anything that are not clear? Anybody?
No questions so far, Professor.
No question, Professor.
Thank you. I will share this with you because this is another PowerPoint that I have. It's a little bit friendlier, and maybe it will makes it easier for you, because I want to talk about sampling, and I want to talk about instruments today, right? Like the types of sampling, everything that I'm saying, it's in the 3 books that I provide you, that I share with you, right? So if you have any doubts, besides asking me on the platform or by chat on the WhatsApp, you can also go to your books and read them, okay? I have the part of the, hold on. Okay, this is kind of easier to check. Maybe it's more understandable. We got sampling methods, types and techniques, and even examples on how we get this. I'm sorry, okay, when you conduct research about a group of people, it's rarely possible to collect data from every person in that group. Instead, you select a sample. That's what a sample is. The sample is a group of individuals who will actually participate in the research. That means I have a bigger population, right? I can have 40 students, or I can have 80 students, but my sample will consist of those individuals who are there the day that I am providing with the instrument. Let's say I have 80 students, but today, the day that they are going to take, I have, I don't know, 9 people absent, so they're not part of the sample. You see the difference? They are part of the whole population, but they are not part of the sample. To draw valid conclusions from your results, you have to carefully decide how you will select the sample that is representative of the group as a whole. This is called a sampling method. There are 2 primary types of sampling method that you can use in research. Probability sampling which involves random selection, allowing you to make strong statistical inferences about the whole group, right? So I take probability sampling when I choose just about anybody, and I have, I can say that out of 100 people who were interviewed, 90 respond that so and so. So I have a very strong statistical number, right? A non-probability sampling involves non-random selection based on convenient or other criteria, allowing you to easily collect data. You should clearly explain how you selected your sample in the methodology section of your paper, as well as how you approach minimizing research bias in your work, right? Because sometimes when you are doing probability sampling, they can consider you to be biased. But generally speaking, quantitative method does not actually consider it to be biased, whereas in qualitative method it does, right? First, what is the difference between population and sample? You need to understand the difference between a population and identify the target population of your research. The population is the entire group you want to draw conclusions about. The sample is just one piece, a specific group of individuals that you will collect data from, right? Sometimes the population is the same as the sample. Let's say you have chosen 80 students because you have 40 students in each group, in each course. So you have chosen the 80 students and all 80 of them are here today. So they are taking the questionnaire, for example. So in that case, your population is equal to your sample, okay? The population can be defined in terms of geographical location, age, income, or many other characteristics. It will depend on me what I want to get from them, okay? It can be very broad or it can be quite narrow. Maybe you want to make inferences about the whole adult population of your country, which is very big, right? How many adult population do we have? How many people above 20 do we have, right, that are considered adults? Maybe your research focuses on customers of a certain company, right? Or patients with specific health condition, or students in a single school, just one school, right? So in that case, it could be narrow, right? But in the other case, if I choose, for example, customers of Coca-Cola company, oh my God, yes, I will have plenty of respondents, right? It is important to carefully define your target population according to the purpose and practicalities of your project. And when I mean purpose, I have to consider my question, right? My general question and my specific questions, because in my specific questions lies the purpose of my project. What is it that I want to know? Okay. If the population is very large or demographically mixed or dispersed, it might be difficult to gain access to a representative sample. A lack of a representative sample affects the validity of your results, right? Let's say I choose, and it can lead to several research biases, particularly sampling bias, right? Let's say I said, I want to ask all teenagers, right? But for some reason, I decide not to include teenagers of a certain area of Asunción, for example, right? I don't know, maybe because I consider them I don't know, not prepared or with different, with higher education standards or whatever, but that could be a research bias. It could be considered a research bias there. Sampling frame. The sampling frame is the actual list of individuals that the sample will be drawn from. Ideally, it should include the entire target population, right? And nobody who is not part of that population. So I choose all adults in Paraguay, right? That's my frame. I should not exclude anybody that is above 20. For example, and I give you an example so it will be easier for us to identify. You're doing research on working conditions at a social media marketing company. So your population is all 1,000 employees of the company. You have 1,000 employees. Your sampling frame is the company's human resource database, which lists the names of contact and contact details of every employee. That's your frame. Okay. However, your sample size will depend, right? The number of individuals you should include in your sample depends on various factors, right? Including the size and variability of the population and your research design. There are different sample size calculators and formulas depending on what you want to achieve with a statistical analysis. So, for example, if we go back to our sampling frame there, right? You're doing the research on working conditions, right? And you have 1,000 employees. So, how you can do your sample size. Let's say I don't actually want everybody there, but I will choose, I don't know, the ones that have above 25, for example, right? My sampling frame is everybody, but my sample itself are people who are over 25. Is that makes sense? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yes, Professor.
Okay. So again, we're talking here, we're discussing probability sampling methods. Probability sampling means that every member of the population has a chance of being selected. It is mainly using quantitative research. If you want to produce results that are representative in the whole population, probability sampling techniques are most valid choices. Okay? So I want to, for example, I want to do a study that tells me about the educational system. So with those results, I want to implement a new law, for example, or a new curriculum, right? So therefore, my representation of the whole population, I mean, the population that I choose have to be representative, okay? So therefore, I'm choosing probability sampling or probabilistic sampling methods, okay? Within, like we said, we already, the difference here is that I can provide with examples. We already discussed this in the other PowerPoint. We have simple random sampling. Every member of the population has the equal chance, and your sampling frame should include the whole population. To conduct this type of sampling, you can use tools like random numbers generators or other techniques that are based entirely on chance. The key word on simple random sampling is chance, right? It's like the Hunger Game. The Hunger Games, like, okay, we have to raffle the names or raffle the numbers, and everybody who has zeros in their numbers should be chosen. That's simple random sampling. An example, you want to select a sample of 1,000 employees of a social media marketing again, you assign a number to every employee in the company from 1 to 1,000 and use a random number generator to select 100 numbers. You raffle it, right? You give them, you assign them numbers from 1 to 1,000, and then you raffle. And whatever number comes out, it will provide you with 100 numbers, 100 people with different numbers according to the raffle, right? Which is just by chance. Like I said, chance is the key word here. Okay. Then we have, I'm sorry, I'm going to fix this. I don't like. Then we have the systematic sampling, right? Which is similar to the simple random sampling, but it's usually slightly easier to conduct, right? Every member of the population is listed with a number, but instead of randomly generating numbers, individuals are chosen at regular intervals. That's the example that I gave you with out of 10 people, the number 10th was interviewed, right? That's systematic sampling. So they are listed in alphabetical orders according to this exercise, to this example. So from the first 10 numbers, you randomly select a starting point. For example, number 6. So I give,
Professor?
yes.
Yes, can we say that in the systematic sampling, I mean, it says here irregular interval. So, for instance, if I want to, well, it's not a raffle, right? But what if I use, for instance, for group number 1, those the even number, and group number 2, odd numbers, for instance? It is that possible to use? I mean, using the systematic sampling, I say.
Well, no, because you won't be consistent. It won't be systematic because you're using 2 groups, one with odd numbers and one with even numbers. So I think whenever you're going to choose that, you should choose, because whenever you explain how you take your sample, you have to be able to say that you have chosen all even numbers of every group. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Because otherwise you're like mixing up everything. So for example, every 10th person on the list is selected, 6, 16, 26, 36, and so on, until you end up with 100 people. If you use this technique, it's important to make sure that there is no hidden pattern in the list that might skew the sample. For example, if the database of the human resource groups are in teams, and team members are listed in order of seniority, that means, okay, I have my list of human resources and I have all the managers in the first group. There is a risk that your interval might skip over people in junior roles, for example, resulting in a sample that is skewed towards seniors employee. So I have to make sure that there are no teams or that there are not hierarchization, right? There are no hierarchies in that pattern that I have. Okay. All right. Okay. Stratify. Stratify sampling involves dividing the population into subpopulation. This is what we call clusters, right? No, it's not. This is stratify. Remember, we said stratas. For example, they have to be stratas that differ in important ways. For example, male and female, right? It allows you to draw more precise conclusions by ensuring that every subgroup is properly represented in the sample, right? So I have 5 men, 5 women, 5 children, 5 teenagers, let's say. So I provide different stratas for that sample. To use this sampling method, you divide the population into subgroups. Like like I said, it has to have relevant characteristics like gender, age, income, job role, right? Based on the overall proportion of the population, you calculate how many people should be sampled from each subgroup. Because if you have, in a group of employees, you have 50 women and you only have 10 men, then you're going to have to do it the proportion. How many women are you going to interview and how many men you're going to interview to make it proportional, okay? Stratified sampling, for example, the company has 100 female employees and 200 male employees. Well, this is kind of like I said, you want to ensure that the sample reflects the gender balance of the company, right? So you sort the population into 2 stratas based on genders. So you use random sampling of each group, selecting 80 women and 20 men, which gives you a representative sample of 100 people, right? So you add them up in just to get the 100%, but you have to have like the amount of, you see, we took 10%. If you look at here, we took 10% of this group and 10% of this group, okay? And therefore, we have an appropriate sampling, right? Or the stratified, is a representative sample, right? Of these, how many? 1,000 employees, right? It's not like I have 1,000 employees and I took, I don't know, 90 women and 10 men, or because it won't be, the proportion won't be the same, right? Are you getting it? Is it not?
Yeah. Yes, Professor.
Yes?
It's very interesting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I like that. So it's kind of complicated, right? It's kind of complicated. Then we have the cluster sampling, which we already mentioned, like subdividing into subgroups again. So cluster sampling also involves dividing the population into subgroups, but each subgroup should have similar characteristics to the whole sample, right? Instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select entire subgroups. If it is practically impossible, you might include every individual from each sample cluster. If the clusters themselves are large, you can also sample individuals from within each cluster using one of the techniques above, right? And this is called multi-stage sampling. This method is good for dealing with large and dispersed population, but there is more risk of error in the sample, as there could be substantial differences between clusters. It's difficult to guarantee that the clusters are really representative of the whole population. So let me give you an example. I'll provide you with an example. The company has offices in 10 cities across the country, all with roughly the same number of employees in similar roles. You don't have the capacity to travel to every office to collect your data, so you use random sampling to select 3 offices out of the 10 spares around the country, right? And those are your clusters. Okay. Let me show you. Are there any questions so far?
No, Professor, so far is there is no question so far, so good. So
Okay.
the cluster sampling, yes, very interesting, Professor. So if you want to know some information, so you just I can say randomly choose or choosing, I'm sorry,
Choosing.
3 of 10 to get some data if you want to know about your offices, right? Very interesting, Professor.
Yeah, but you have your subgroup should have similar characteristics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of those subgroups, you select, you randomly select the entire subgroups. Okay. So that's the difference. In cluster sampling, you have to have characteristics, similar characteristics to each. Okay. Okay, hold on.
Professor, can we say that can we apply? I mean, if you want to know some information about your enterprise, right? So if you are doing some researching, I mean, can we use in one project?
Mm-hmm.
Can we use different types of sampling?
No, it's not
So,
a good idea, Mariano. It's not.
Mhm.
It's not a good idea. Once you select your sampling, you have to establish how you're going to do that sampling. And because it has to be in your report, you have to establish how you did the sampling. And you shouldn't mix the types of samplings you're having, because you can have different results there.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, for example, in a stratified sampling, if you have if your human resource database is done in hierarchy order, for example, you will have like your first two groups all managers, or you will have your I don't know, your last groups could be only common employees. So the difference, the results won't be the same. So it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to combine types of sampling. You should choose one type of sampling and
Just
work
yes.
accordingly to that. Okay.
Yes, because I was thinking about my TFG projects. I want to know in a population of 100 students, for example.
Okay.
So how many of them? How many boys and how many girls? I mean, talking about students, how many Anglicisms they are using every day, and in what type of Anglicisms they use, for instance, right? So in a group of this this population of 100 people, I will apply, for instance, not the cluster, the other some I don't remember.
The stratified, because you're gonna choose like 50 boys and 50 girls, right?
Yes.
You will be doing the stratified sampling, okay? And you will have the same characteristics, like in this case, gender, right?
Yes.
You could have other types of differences, like age, for example, or preferences, or people who already study English and people who don't. You see, those are going to make the difference, because probably they will use more Anglicisms if they already know English. So that would make a difference.
Very interesting, Professor. So I can use Excel also, Microsoft Excel to use how can I say bars, the cake
Yeah, graphic. Yeah, the bar graph.
graphic.
Yes. You can
Yeah,
use
oh my God. Very
you
good.
you can use like just about any method of statistical figures, right? But it will depend on what you want to find, what graphics. Yes, thank you, Fumi. What you want to find, and what type of sampling you're having, and what type of method you're choosing, which I think is quantitative, Mariano, the ones that you want to do. Right? Okay?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Very good. Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me check. I wanted to share. Hold on. Let me go back to the things that I have there. Okay. Okay, I wanted to let me see. I wanted to give you some of the differences. Actually, I wanted to share with you the sampling terminology, right? And sampling terminology is what do you call the pieces of information that you have. For example, we know that population is a whole group of students or participants in your study, right? And we have different names that you have to handle because those are the names that you're going to require whenever you are in front of the table, ¿verdad? De la mesa evaluadora. They probably ask you how you have taken the sampling, and you have to know what they're talking about, right? So we need to have this specific. This is in Ranjit Kumar book. You can access it because it's in your it's in the link of your platform. So what are the sampling terminology? Let's consider the examples used above, where our main aims are to find out the average age of the class, the average incomes of the families living in the city, and the likely election outcomes for a particular state or country. So let's assume that you adopt the sampling method. That is, you select a few students, families, or electorates to achieve the aims. In this process, there are numbers of aspects. So the class, families living in a city, or electorates from which you select your sample are called population or study population, right? And since we need to do certain calculations for population, we use the letter N. In the formulas that we need to do in order to know the percentage of whatever our findings are, we know that population is called by the letter N. The small groups of students, families, or electors from whom you will collect the required information to estimate the average age of the class or the average income or the election outcome is called the sample, right? So the number of these people that helps you out obtaining the required information is the sample size, right? And is usually denoted by the lowercase n. If you look at it, the letter N, the capital N is for population, and the lower n is for sample size, right? The way you select these students or families or electors are called sampling design or sampling strategy, right? So how do you select them? It's whatever we were discussing, right? Stratify, cluster, random, etc. Each student, family, or elector that becomes the basis for selecting your sample is called the sampling unit or the sampling element, okay? A list identifying each student, family, or elector is called the sampling frame, okay? Remember the frame we mentioned of about the 1,000 employees, right? All of those are the sampling frame. If all the elements in a sampling population cannot be individually identified, you cannot have a sampling frame for that study population, right? If we cannot identify them, right? But if we do identify them, like the 1,000 employees in a company, that is called a sampling frame. Your findings based on the information obtained from your respondents are called sample statistics. Your sample statistics become the basis of estimating the prevalence of the above characteristics in the study population. Actually, your sample statistics is the information that you have acquired and measure in a way. Yeah. Your main aim is to find answers to your research questions in the study population, not in the sample you collected information from. From sample statistics, you make an estimate of the answers to our research question in the study population, right? The estimates arrived at from sample statistics are called population parameters or the population mean. We do not use the population in general when we cannot access to them, right? So when we have large numbers of population, let's say the entire country, what we do is we take sample statistics because we infer that since we have these answers, we estimate that the answers are going to be true for everyone. That's what the population, I mean, that's the population parameters when we estimate that from the sample
Like
statistics.
the census, professor,
Yes,
like the census, a few years ago.
exactly, because we actually do not get the whole population. We get most of the population, so we can estimate something. We don't actually, we have statistical numbers, right? So we have like a forecast of how things happen in the country. So it is like the census. Yes. Okay, you don't want this. This is kind of hard. But actually, most of you are not doing field work. Am I right? Most of you are not doing field work. Most of you are doing documentary, right? Could you raise your hand, the ones of you who are doing field work? Please raise your hand. People?
Yeah, professor, so in my case, I'm gonna be doing some sampling. I'm gonna be taking a sampling
Okay.
for students who use Anglicism, for instance. So is that a field work?
Yes,
Yes. So
definitely.
I'm gonna
It's
train.
field work because you're going to ask, yeah, you're gonna interview your students to know
Yeah.
what is the kind of Anglicism, or make a questionnaire for your students in order to
Uh-huh.
know what kind of Anglicism they're using.
For
So
example, professor, so how many questions do I have to ask them to know what I want to know, to get the information, to get the data? For instance, in from doing and or getting 5 questions, I'm gonna get the information I need.
are
Right?
you sure? It depends. It all depends on your questions and your general question and your specific questions. What
Mhm.
actually do you want to know? Because one of the things that I was thinking about your theme, Mariano, is that you say Anglicism, but you don't specify what type of Anglicism you're talking about. What for example, you have different Anglicisms. You can have marketing Anglicisms. You can have like the ones you mentioned, sale or discounts or whatever. Or you can have Anglicisms like the ones are used when you play video games, for example, right? So they're going to use other types of Anglicism. Or are you going to put them all in the same bag? What are you going to do?
I'm still thinking about it because every day I'm listening to people. So there are a lot of words in English they are using, and they think, in my opinion, they think they are using a normal word, but they don't know they are using anglicisms. For
Okay.
instance, last Monday, I was listening to a lady. She was talking to a friend, and she
Uh-huh.
said, "Wow, esa película fue un boom en su época." And I
Uh-huh.
was like, "Oh my God, the word boom is English."
Okay. But you see, this is what I mean. I'm not supposed to intervene in your paper, but
Huh?
if you take a look at it, you're talking about a lady, right? Which is not a teenager and which is using a word or an anglicism that is used normally when you are discussing movies. So you mean anglicism in general? To what range? Because you need to have a range, or else you're gonna have to, I don't know, do systematic sampling, like taking 1 out of 10 people or out of 1 out of 5 people to ask questions and say, okay, what do you know about anglicism, right?
Mhm.
And they will say, I don't know, I don't have any idea. And
Yeah.
for example, you provide them with 5 words. Which of these 5 words do you normally use or know what it means, right? But
Mhm.
you will have to determine somehow or another what type of words you're dealing with. Are you talking about movie words? Are you talking about like thriller or like um spoilers, or
Mhm.
are you talking about games worth, like, I don't know, those words that the children use nowadays, or are you talking about technological fishing? I don't know. There's so many words that we used every day, but they
Mhm.
are divided again in subgroups of categories, like technological field, commercial field, marketing field. I don't know. There's thousands of words that we can use, and they will be fair. Their use will be fair on the age of the users. You know what I mean?
Yes, Professor.
Okay. So you first have to decide whether you want to do it all, like any Anglicism at all, randomly, not doing any categorization
Mhm.
of the words, right? And you select your population, or you're gonna have to decide whether your target is gonna be just teenagers, and
Mhm.
what type of Anglicism do they use, and what field of Anglicism they use. You see what
Yes.
I mean?
Yes, if I choose teenagers, they probably will be talking about the games.
They were probably talking about games. They were probably talking about technology. They were probably talking about
Music?
music, or even
Mhm.
computer words,
Yeah, computer. Yes. Yes,
right?
Professor.
Because they're used to technology, so they'll be using those words.
Mhm.
So
Fumi, raise the hand.
yes, Fumi.
Hello, Professor. I think, as far as I know or see or hear about, I mean, from my students, they
Yes.
mostly use, they are more into social media, like TikTok, and like, for example, any music application like Spotify, or not really games, but games, for example, only the boys used to play,
Okay.
but they don't use much about uh, like a range of words that has to do with games. Um, but I know they use social media and not even songs, because the population where I work, I mean the place where I work, they listen to reggaeton and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are few students who really listen to like good music. For me, it's like in English or Spanish and not reggaeton. There is a very limited
Small,
amount of students.
small population.
Yeah, a small population. And but I think they mostly use social media, words or trends
Oh,
or girls, for example, it has to do with makeup things.
well, I think that's good. Maybe one of your questions will be to determine which group do they use most, like which anglicism do they use most, to find
Okay.
out about. But you're probably gonna have to provide them with a bunch of words to see whether
Mhm.
they know the meaning or not.
Yeah.
Professor, so
Yes.
right now, the popular word they're using right now is the word trend.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
Doing this, reels and history and trend because they do these short videos,
Oh,
using
yes.
the TikTok platform.
Okay. Which is great because you already have some kind of knowledge of what they're doing, right? What they're using. And I think it's fine, right? It's fine that you already know, but that could be also one of your questions, right? I don't know. I don't have quite clear because I just don't remember. It's not because I didn't read it. Is I just don't remember your main question. What was your main question? But I think it was, what is the Anglicism used by teenagers, right?
Yes. High school
Yes.
teenagers or
Okay,
high
so
school students.
high school students, exactly. So one of your specific questions should be, what categories of Anglicisms are they using most? Right? And you may provide the division of the subcategories that are in your theoretical framework, and then said that actually these students are using this and this and this type of words rather than those that may be used by other people. Okay?
Okay.
Yes,
Oh,
Professor.
good. Anybody else who would like to talk about that for a little bit? Or maybe we can move on, because I wanted to move on to, hold on, I'm gonna, I need to open this up. No, it's not this one. It's this one right here. Okay, it's about instruments. All right. It's about instruments. So once we know that we're going to, we have, this is about quantitative, but they are true also for qualitative in some points. So let me share this with you, and then we will try to do as much as possible. I'm very concerned that we are not going to have classes next Thursday and again on the 15th. So I'm trying to rush a little bit. So can you see constructing a research instrument in quantitative research? Can you see it? Or not yet?
Yes, Professor. Constructing a research instrument in quantitative research.
Okay, good. So the construction of a research instrument, because you have to be aware that you have to construct an instrument. If you're gonna do field work, you need to make an instrument. You could also use another already made instrument, but in that case, you will also have to validate it. Okay. The construction of a research instrument or tool is an extremely important aspect of a research project, because anything you say by way of findings or conclusions is based upon the type of information you collect. And the data that you collect is entirely dependent upon the questions that you have asked to your respondents. So making the instrument, it's very, very picky, because you have to make the instruments in a way that is reliable, that is trustworthy, and that it actually provides the information that you want to get. Okay? Because sometimes we make questions and they are very ambiguous or they're very broad, and actually when people answer them, they give me whatever other answer that I'm not expecting. It's not what I wanted to find out about. You see? So that's what makes it so important, how we construct our research instruments. The famous saying about computers, garbage in, garbage out, is also applicable to data collection. The research tool provides the input to a study and therefore the quality and validity of the output. The findings are solely dependent upon it. If I make the wrong questions, that means my instrument was not reliable. If I make ambiguous questions and that give me, let's say one person says, yes, I like it, and the other one says, I think the blue one is better, that means something is wrong with my instrument, right? And I'm giving you a very different example, okay? But it's actually very important. What do we have to take in account to when we are building a question, an instrument? We should adopt the following procedure. We have, in step 1, you have now already done so, clearly define and individually list all the specific objectives, research questions, and hypotheses, if any, to be tested or to be answered in the case of questions. In step 2, for each objective or research question, list all the associated questions that you want to answer through your study, okay? So if we take Mariano's and Fumi's work, the first specific question, what was it, Mariano? Would you give me your first specific question?
Right now, I'm not having my computer. I'm my cell phone, Professor. Fumi, do you have the question, the specific one? I think she has it.
I don't have it here. It's in my computer at school.
It's also okay. Well,
But it's in my car.
I'm
My
sorry,
computer, it's in my car.
it's fine. Let's say that your general question is, what are the anglicisms, and the first specific question could be, what's the type of anglicism they're using, right? So in order for you to get those answers, probably your instrument should be semi-structured, and you can ask questions like, do you use anglicism terms like, and I make different groups. A, technology. B, games. And I put let's say I choose 5 words for using in the games, or I choose 5 words using in marketing, and I choose 5 words using in, what could it be? Social media, right? So it would be easier for them to circle A, B, or C, because they see what you mean by categories of anglicism, right? So that's going to answer your first question. What category of words do you use in Anglicism, right? And in step 3, take each question that you identify and list the information required to answer it, which is what I did, right? I took the information. If I want to know which categories, I have to list that information. See, technological, social media, I don't know, makeup, or computer,
Nails.
yeah. So you have to provide that for them to be able to identify those categories you're talking about, because they are not in your brain. You need to clarify to them what you're talking about. And then you have to formulate the questions that you want to ask to obtain that information, right? And that's what you're doing. You're providing them with that information in order for them to just choose which is the category of words that they use, okay? Then you have to be very careful when asking personal or sensitive questions. In the social, in the social sciences, sometimes one needs to ask questions that are of personal nature, and the respondents may find this offensive. So it is important to be aware of these, and it might affect the quality of information or even result in an interview being terminated or not being returned if you're asking about questionnaires. If you're asking very sensitive questions, you have to be very careful on how you make them, right? The best technique to ask sensitive or threatening questions appear to be two opposite opinions based on the manner in which the question is asked. So we can make it in a direct manner or an indirect manner. The advantage of the direct manner is that one can be sure that an affirmative answer is accurate. So I said, for example, have you ever been in drugs? And if that person says yes, then I know that that's for sure, right? Those who advocate the second approach believe that direct questioning is likely to offend their respondents, and hence they are unlikely to answer even the non-sensitive questions, because it seems like people will say, oh, who is this who is just asking me about my life? I don't have, why should I answer those, right? So they probably won't be able to collaborate with you.
And they're gonna be feeling offended.
Yes, that's right. And they can feel offended, or they can feel like you're an intruder coming into their personal lives, or whatever would they do with their lives, right? That they're feeling judged, right? They see you as judgmental. So you have to be very careful with that. So some way.
Professor, and we can listen this with the Paraguayan reporters when they go to the senators or diputados. They ask some personal question and they, hey, I'm not gonna answer these questions.
Exactly.
I remember, yes.
We shut them out. So we have to be very careful on how to ask those questions, right? But of course, like everything, you have an advantage and a disadvantage. So some ways of asking personal questions in an indirect manner, you can, like, for example, showing drawings or cartoons, right? Or by asking a respondent to complete a sentence. I have never done, and he will answer that. What has he never done? Or by asking a respondent to sort cards containing statements, right? If he doesn't want the word to come out, maybe he can choose the answers, right? If it is a very sensitive question, right? I don't know. If you're asking a woman if she had ever been raped, for example, she probably won't like to say it straight, right? But you can, I don't know, or make a completion sentence like, have you ever been? And then you can have the choices, right? In order to ask those questions. The order of question is also of vital importance, right? The order of questions in a questionnaire or an interview is important as it affects the quality of information and the interest or even the willingness of the respondent to participate in the study. Again, we have two different opinions as to the best way to order questions, right? The first is that the question should be asked in a random order. And the second is that they should follow a logical progression based upon the objectives of the study. I am more into the second choice. I will probably choose a logical progression and has to do with my objectives, right? More rather than a random order. But that's me because I'm kind of more structured. The author believes that the latter procedure is better as it gradually leads respondents into the themes of the study, right? The author of this book, which is Kumar, is starting with simple themes and progressive to complex ones. This approach sustains the interest of respondents and gradually stimulates them to answer the questions. However, the random approach is useful in situations where a researcher wants respondents to express their agreement or disagreement with different aspects of a certain issue. In this case, a logical listing of statements or questions may condition a respondent to the opinions expressed by the researcher. So I would rather focus my questions and the order of those questions in a progressive, logical way so that it will answer my questions. They probably answered my first question first, my second question, or it will help me out because let's say I want to know what are some strategies that the teachers use in order for students to speak. And I will ask them, do you normally ask questions to your students, right? And then on my second question, I would probably say, do you normally have your students ask questions to each other? So these two questions lead to my first general question. So those
Elena,
are...
professor, want to speak.
Huh?
Elena, raise a hand.
Okay, Elenita, say it. Elena.
Hello, Professor.
Hey, how are you?
Yes, well, fine. I have a question related to the survey or something, which is called that. I remember and I realize every time I make I'm answering something someone has sent me, there are many questions that are organized in a different way, but they are the same. They have the same goal, the same objective. So I think it is to trying to get that information for real.
That's right.
Yes, and can we use that that kind of tricky thing too into the questionnaires that we are going to make or not?
That's what I was saying, Elena. Maybe you should have, like, if I want to know the strategies of what you use, I may ask different questions in order to get that information, right? So how can I... First of all, I need to know if the people know about it, right? For example, or if I'm not asking questions and I'm doing some kind of exercise. In order for you to know that your students recognize nouns, you do several types of exercises. It's just the same when making questions. You're making questions in different ways in order to get the same objectives, right? As to emphasize, right, yeah, the answer, and for sure say, and you can actually say, yes, this is it. They do know nouns, for example. Okay, so but that doesn't mean that it's tricky. It means that there are different roads that take you to Rome, right? That doesn't mean that it's tricky, because actually,
For me, yes, I just said it like tricky. I know it's not tricky, but it's a way to try to get the information. If you don't get it in the first time with that question, you put another, that same kind of question, but in another.
yes,
You arrange it in another manner, but you put it
yes.
maybe in the 13th place, and then another one in the 24th place. So
Well, I
to be
wouldn't
sure.
do that. Like I said, I would rather have progressive, logical, a logical
Yes.
progression or order in the questions, because otherwise people will get confused.
Yes.
You probably
Yes.
want to
I
have
agree.
everything in one block, right? And besides, it's going to be easier for you to read your results later.
Yes. Yes, Professor. I agree with that.
So
with
be
your opinion.
careful with that, okay? Be very
Thank you,
careful.
Professor. Thank
Okay.
you.
Am I confusing you more or not? Or am I being clear with this?
No, you bring clear, Professor. Thank you.
Okay. If you're getting confused, just let me know. Maybe I can find other ways to clarify this to you. So we have to validate my research instruments. When I make the questions, I have to be able to validate this instrument. How do we validate an instrument? When we apply the instrument to a population that is similar to the one that is going to be interviewed or that is going to receive the questionnaire. Or I give it to a person, let's say an expert on the field, that can validate my instrument, and he does the test, he answers the questions and says, okay, these questions are well constructed, they are well done, they are coherent, they are progressively arranged, they are actually providing the answers to whatever you want to do. So that's pre-testing a research instrument. You can also do it with your classmates, for example, right? You can give it to a certain amount of your classmates or your classmates' students, and they answer the questions. And according to the way they answer, you know if your research instrument is well constructed, okay? Whether that is an interview, a schedule, or questionnaire, it is important that you test it out before using it for actual data collection. Pre-testing a research instrument entails a critical examination of the understanding of each of the questions and its meaning as understood by a respondent, right? Because, like I said, if your instrument is not well done, you will receive several types of answers. And you don't want that. You want them to answer specifically what you're looking for. Therefore, the importance of writing a research instrument. A pre-test should be carried out under actual field conditions on a group of people similar to your study population. The purpose is not to collect data, but to identify problems that the potential respondents might have in either understanding or interpreting a question. Your aim is to identify if there are problems in understanding the way a question has been worded and the appropriateness of the meaning it communicates. Is it really saying what I want to ask? Is it really asking that? Whether different respondents interpret a question differently, and to establish whether the interpretation is different to what you are trying to convey or to obtain with your questions. Is it ambiguous? It provides the information that you are requesting actually. If there are problems, you need to re-examine the wording to make it clearer and unambiguous, right? What is a prerequisite for data collection? Before you start obtaining information from potential respondents, it is imperative that you make sure of their motivation to share the required information. If you have a population that is resistant to answering questions, you better don't ask them, because they will spoil people and answers. They will probably say, why do we have to answer these questions? We don't want to answer these questions. It's probably one person in the group, but he is already convincing the rest not to answer the questions, right? So it is essential for respondents to be willing to share the information with you. They're actually, you have to ask permission for it. So you cannot provide like a questionnaire or an interview without asking people permission for it. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes we ask our students to answer some questions which they don't even know what we want them for, right? We just, since we are in a position of power, since we are their teachers, we just ask them to do it. And they're not even willing to do it, right? But they have to do it because you are their teacher. So you have to make an effort to motivate them by explaining clearly and in simple terms the objectives and the relevance of the study, either at the time of the interview or in the covering letter accompanying the questionnaire, or through interactive statements in a questionnaire. Interactive statements is a very good way to do it with teenagers, right? We have to have a clear understanding of the questions. When the respondents answer, they have to understand what they are expected in the questions. What do you want me to answer? If respondents do not understand a question clearly, the response given may be either wrong or irrelevant, or it makes no sense. And we don't want either of those. We don't want wrong answers, we don't want irrelevant answers, or we don't want no sense answers, right? We want responses that will help me out because they're providing me with pertinent information.
Professor, in that part, it means that if the respondent doesn't, they don't want to answer that question, that they're gonna answer cualquier verdura, they call it, right?
Yeah, right. They will answer cualquier verdura. They probably leave you, I don't know, they write other things, or they give you wrong information, or they say cualquier verdura, irrelevant or make no sense. So you don't want that, right? So they have to understand clearly the questions you're making, right? Try not to trick them into something that they don't understand. Be very explicit when you are making the question. What is actually what is really what you want to know, okay? So the other thing is the possession of the required information. The third prerequisite is that, yes.
What if they don't want to answer the questions? What do we do in that case?
Well,
Something happens.
Yes, it's not, I mean, there are different people with different attitudes. We have to first look at, we have different groups of students, for example, and we know that some are lazier than others. So maybe we could go to the ones that are not so lazy to answer a questionnaire. But besides that, we could, you know, work in the fact that we have to motivate them. This is what it says here. You should make every effort to motivate them by explaining why is this why is the answer so important? Why is this study that I'm doing so important? How is that going to be helpful to me or to them even, right? And it's like making them feel important because their answer is important to you. So they have to know that, right? But if you have, for example, I think I told you about the example of the indigenous people who were asked some questions, but their cacique wouldn't let them answer. So there's nothing you can do there, because if their cacique won't let them answer, they won't answer. So you have to, they have to, they have to be, you have to make an effort to convince them. And that's what a good researcher do, right? To try to convince them into providing you with the information to cooperate, right? Okay, the third prerequisite is that respondents must have the information sought. This is a particular importance when you are seeking factual or technical information. If respondents do not have the required information, they cannot provide it. So you have to be clear, right, about what do you want them to give you. So this is one of the constructing a research instrument for quantitative research. We still had the qualitative research to be developed. So I think we're gonna stop here. And is there anything that you will like to ask? So maybe
Professor,
yes.
yes, I remember one part. I recently answered some questions in a questionnaire, like a survey, in a form. So there was a part I remember. It was a really personal questions, and it says, I remember, if you don't want to answer this question, please go to question number 4, for instance.
Okay.
So
Okay.
skip that question. There
Yes, you can
are
do,
yes.
yes, you can do that. You can do that. Or for example, if you have, for example, do you know about this? And they don't. So you probably skip the second question because they will have to jump to the third question, which is, I don't know, how would you feel about so and so? Because like when I ask the questions, do you know about Ley 1532? And some teachers said, no, I didn't. So I cannot answer, how did you find about them? Because they already answered no, right? So you have to jump and you have to skip the second or third question and go to the fourth one, right? And you have to specify that. And that is correct to do, right? Because there you will have two informations: the amount of people who did not know about what you were asking, and the other group of people who knew about it, but it didn't do anything about it, right? Or didn't apply the law, or didn't have access to the information or whatever. So there you will have extra information. Okay?
Okay, Professor.
Okay, well, guys, I will probably send you a guide, and what I want to know, you didn't tell me, so maybe Mariano, you could ask your classmates, when is the best time for me to upload? Not now, because it's Teacher's Day, after the 8th of May. So after the 8th of May, you're gonna have a quiz, and you will have to tell me when to upload the quiz, okay? And let me know.
I will, Professor, I will. We are still choosing the date.
Okay, please, the date and the time. Okay, you
Okay,
said
Professor.
weekends, so you tell me what time during the weekends. Okay?
All right, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being there.
Yes, Professor. I enjoy your class today. Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor.
Very good.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor.
Professor.